give yourself some compassion, because a lot of the alphas don't do it. I don't fear anything. I don't burn out. Burnout's for people that don't have the drive, everything else. Yeah, like stick around long enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? Make your goals big enough. It will strip you. So if you're listening to this and you come to Active Life and you're a pro-lifer because you were stripped down before this, you are beat up, you want this outcome, and you've sacrificed a lot, and you might look back at some of the things that you're hearing and think like, I screwed that up. You are still in the game.
BJ McKay, welcome to the Active Life podcast.
Happy to be here.
I'm stoked to have you. So
thanks.
When I told Ken, so for people who don't know, I told Ken, who is my mentor, he's mine, right? I hate saying it like that, but that I wanted to do more content with our clients, our staff members, and get to know people who are within our ecosystem, because I think the most valuable thing that we have is the people who are in the ecosystem, whether it's people who own a gym like you in Indiana or somebody who is on our staff. I always like to believe that the value of the group is greater than the value of the information shared with the group. And he immediately said, you should interview BJ. So when I reached out to you and you offered to fly out and have this conversation in person, I blocked the whole day and I wanted to get to know you. And I admittedly, I didn't ask you many questions before now because I wanted to learn most of it on the podcast.
Right.
So what leads a guy who is already successful in his own right, working for a consulting company that you're a partner at, to open a micro gym?
Yeah. So some clarifier, not a partner.
Oh, sorry.
No. Been there a long time, and maybe a sharecropper is a better way to put it than any kind of partner. But what made me open a micro gym, to be honest with you, is a little bit of selfishness. I mean, I'd have to put that out there because we were sharing earlier in terms of like, you're a psychopath, you're crazy, you're doing all these things. I was a track and field athlete, a pole vaulter.
Okay.
Coming up, I was fortunate enough to do that in college, and the type of training that we did as pole vaulters was weightlifting, plyometrics, sprinting, bounding, climbing ropes, trampoline, jump, and like all kinds of gymnastics. And then so we did that, and when I got out of college, I coached for a little bit, but I struggled to find a home. So I tried this Navy SEAL style training, this SEAL Fit from out in Encinitas. I'm like, oh, this is great. And
with Divine?
Yeah. Okay. And I called this funny story. I called because I couldn't finish any of the workouts. I tried probably like 9 or 10. I couldn't finish. I called. I'm like, hey, so is this supposed to be like pieced out throughout the day? No, straight up. I'm like, thanks. Appreciate that. Thanks. All right. Goodbye. I'm like, all right, well, you're not so tough. So I explored a lot of things. And then I finally met, I went to a client through Advisa down in Virginia Beach, and I got done. I think we were doing sales training down there, and we got done. Like, hey, you want to go throw down? I'm like, what? It's like, you train, right? You want to go train? I'm like, I thought that's what I just did for 8 hours with you. Oh, dude, did you ever do CrossFit? And I'm like, no. So that was my first exposure, and I went with 2 gentlemen there and watched a 50-year-old guy absolutely destroy me. I'm like, it was just so humbling. So I left there and kind of manufactured my own version of that, backyard YMCA, and I'd invite people to train with me, and they'd train with me once.
Because they didn't want the intensity.
Yeah, they didn't. It's like it just was too much. And granted, I did not come up formal through exercise science and coaching and everything else. I came tangential to it. So at one point I talked to my wife and I'm like, hey, I think I want to open up one of these gyms. No one seems to be wanting to open up one here, which I was more than willing to pay several $100s to be a member of. All I was doing was waiting because this is great.
Right.
Like someone's going to do this. And I'm kind of waiting. I'm busy. I have a career. It's going well. No one did it. So I'm like, well, I'll do it. She's like, so wait, you're going to open up a gym and get a big loan out, which we can talk about the mistakes made later, that no one will do for free. Yeah, but I think if I charge them money, they'll stick around. And sure enough, it was well enough that we ended up selling about 15 to 20 memberships, full price for the year, that I took to the bank as the collateral, and then that's how the gym showed up. Okay.
So what was your wife's response when you told her you wanted another job?
I think my wife, Erica, is a saint, and she polar opposite of me. She sees me do all these things and understands that I tend to only find focus in variety.
Okay.
When you got to isolate, and I've heard over and over again from mentors, like you really got to dial into like the one thing. And for whatever reason, even if they're right, it just didn't work. Mm-hmm. The more I got dialed in, the more I was aloof. I'm doing the one thing and I'm just trying. It was harder to stay focused. When I used a time constraint, which was other hobbies, ideas, interests, or something like that, I got far more work done. And it was more enjoyable in tighter timeframes. So she wasn't worried.
Do you think that the one thing, I'm a big proponent. I'm all about, for myself, focusing on the one thing. I've had 4 or 5 things going on at the same time, and none of them were successful. I was chasing a bunch of rabbits and going hungry. Do you think that for you, the reason why more than one thing at the same time is valuable is because of where your brain goes if it has the freedom and the lack of constraint to just think about how to do one thing extremely well?
Yeah, I think what's the best way to answer that question? I think what it does is I look at my time and energy as 2 different buckets. And I learned this from a mentor, woman I really respect, my boss, Heather Haas, talked about this. There's a difference between time and energy. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I have 100% of a work week, my work time. And I can parcel out that any way I want to. And then my aims, you might look at different things that I'm doing and say, oh, this is different than that. That's you're scattered. Mm-hmm. But really they're all aimed at these higher order things, and it's a percentage of time. So when I started the gym, I had my consulting, and I never stopped doing that. Right. I'm in the middle of my 13th year, I think, doing that. The gym's in its 8th year, going on 9th year.
And your consulting was established.
Yes.
When you started the gym.
Yeah. I was there probably 4-ish years, where I've been there 13. So it was about like 4 or 5 years already when that happened. But what I committed to was 90% of my work time is going to be in consulting, and I'm going to be using 10% of my time on this. And what ended up happening, because this is the concentric circles of interest, was I had my own, and I'm consulting with, I've a couple Fortune 100 companies and some 500, but mostly it's, 1,500 to 2,000 employee organizations around the Midwest. That's my wheelhouse. I'm talking to business owners, leaders of HR, leaders of sales, all this other stuff about these things that beforehand I didn't really understand. Now I'm over here making payroll for 6 months out of my own checking account. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to figure out a pro forma and not understanding why isn't this working? I'm so brilliant over here. I work with these and they tell me, like, you've helped me make all this and you've helped me do this. Why am I so terrible over here? So it ended up becoming this petri dish for me to say, that idea is so good, huh, BJ? All right, why don't you go try it? Tough guy. Mm-hmm. And then I would and realize, like, you're dumb. That's so glad you didn't say that to a client. And then I would be able to go and after things got established, I was able to share my own builder story. Mm-hmm. My own story of like, hey, oh man, sorry, but you're probably going to tell me, BJ. You're probably going to tell me. And I'm like, oh, you want me to tell you the 6 ways I screwed that up? You only screwed up twice. You're a beginner at screwing up. And then, so they all merge together to the same end.
So that's interesting, because I think one of the reasons why for me doing one thing at a time has always been the key is I never did one thing well, got it running, had it be successful, and then tried to add the next thing to it. And I was talking to Jason Kalipa on his podcast last week, the Effort Over Everything podcast. He was saying he was talking to a group of 6th and 7th graders, and they were asking him, how many different revenue streams is too many when you're diversifying what you're doing? Because he was talking about revenue diversification. And I answered him, I said, the answer to that is 2 is too many if 1 isn't already working well. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just talking out loud that for you, having the 5 years in the consulting, building success there, and then moving to the next one, I wonder if you would advise somebody how would you help somebody decide if they're someone who should do one thing or if they're ready to do multiple things?
Well, I'd start off with 2 things, 2 questions. And one question is a little bit more layered, which we talked a little bit about earlier, which is how much do they even know themselves? Mm-hmm. So when they talk about diversification, are they talking about, I need to make this amount of money, or I want, like, sometimes they're getting too far into their aims before they even know who they are. Like, do you have a good grounding in who you are, what you're willing to suffer to get that, and what you think it's going to feel like when you get there, or what you think this journey might look like? Sometimes they're in a hurry to get to this aim that was given to them or outlined by someone else, a parent, an uncle, an aunt, a friend. There's some version of success that they've articulated that they want that version of success, but they shortchange this part. Who are you? Mm-hmm. And so I try to get those questions answered in order. I'm going to get to a direct answer to your question. So when I have that, then I start talking about some of the blocking and tackling of like time management and focus. How well have you demonstrated this, Dr. Sean, and how long have you demonstrated it? Can you give signs of success that look like something like what this might look like? And then it's essentially building a journey or a path to skill develop, adjust behaviors, adjust things so that you can have those additive things in your life. And some of it is for some people, it's not like a separate business like I have. Some people, it's just a active hobby or interest they can't get to stick for some reason. They feel it's conflicting with where they're at. Sometimes that's just a manage of relationship management, time management, and clear communication with other people where they're falling short, where it's easier to tie that in. So I think that's where I start. And then where it goes, I mean, that's as variable as whoever I'm talking to.
I can relate to a lot of that, especially the sacrifice. I was talking to you earlier about the conversation I had with my father when it was time for me to decide I wasn't going to do the in-clinic thing anymore. I was going to go for the online thing, that I had to have the conversation with him where I said, I'm willing to sacrifice the success I'm experiencing today for the opportunity to pursue what I'm successful. I mean, what I'm passionate about for tomorrow. A lot of your business that you do in the consulting side is leadership training. Yes.
Yes.
So did you find any additional stress in saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to jump into the arena myself? Because now what happens is you own a gym, you have staff who are working for you. Mm-hmm. You have to take all of the things that you believed to be true, that you were consulting with other people on, that you just mentioned, now you start trying them yourself. Was there ever a moment for you where you put more pressure on yourself than maybe was needed because your worth as a consultant you felt was on the line with your success in the gym?
I think early on, I realized this is a mistake.
Okay. Which was a mistake? The pressure or the gym?
Both.
Okay.
I overestimated my own excellence or my own ability to will something into existence. And where I failed wasn't that I could do it. I failed at what the trade-offs were going to be.
What were some of the trade-offs?
The trade-offs was I can will this, but it's dragging people, pulling people, pushing people, more hours, stress, late at night. There was never a question that I was going to fail. Mm-hmm. It was just, what was it going to, succeed? What was I willing to sacrifice? What was it going to cost people around me?
What does it look like to pull somebody, push somebody? Like when you describe that, you're doing it metaphorically.
Yeah, no, I think, and this is something that could relate to coaches that are listening to this. Like when you're in the hiring process, I've heard some of these on our community calls where you need a person to be this person so bad that you sell, if you're a good salesperson, you sell a version of them that even they want to be, that they're not. And that they don't really, that they want, like that sounds better than what I even had for me. So I'm going to go do that. And then you sit there when they say yes, I say yes. And then you watch it not happen. And you're like, wait, Dr. Sean, I talked to you and I hired the person and da-da-da. Who did you hire? Well, I hired this. No. Did you really know? Did you listen long enough? Or was it your agenda and your voice and your telling and your vision? Did you stop to listen? Did you stop to ask hard questions that this, I know, may not be your unicorn that you're hunting for, that's just going to fit perfect into the puzzle that you're making? So I've made those mistakes, and all of a sudden I'm there having these very hard management conversations, tough conversations that are exhausting because I want people to like me. I want people to love me. I want my members and athletes at the gym. I want my clients to love me. And when that's not happening, it's hard to sleep at night. And there was a lot of that cost. And then waking up, like, what did I do? Why did you open a stupid? You could have just went to a gym. You could have drove to it. Like, and I started those dark voices come up that like, yeah, like see how little you know, BJ.
Well, we used to have, I've had many conversations with gym owners who were experiencing significantly undercharged memberships, who were not achieving any kind of financial success, who had other jobs where they didn't need the gym to be the thing that they did. And the challenge that I put to them was charge the appropriate price and find out if you have a business. Because the worst case scenario is everybody leaves. You bring the equipment into your garage and you let the people from the gym who you like come work out with you in a community environment where you have none of the stress of who's coaching that class. Did this person get hurt? We got to find a new member, paying rent. There's no reason to put yourself through that stress unless you want that business. So when you talk about pulling people and pushing people to doing what they need to be able to do, how did you change that? How did you change from I'm going to will this thing to financial success so that it can be a thing to I am going to inspire other people to do a great job?
Yeah. And I don't know when the moment it happened, but it was admitting that I was the bad leader. It was my fault that I was in this situation. I was not a victim. I was not like, look at all this stuff happening to me. My decisions and my storyline and my narrative and my state was creating everything that was happening to me. Even the behavior of other people, which you could say, look, Dr. Sean, they see it, they're doing it. I even got to the point where what things have I done over the last week that would make that behavior make sense? And I started, and it's a dark place when you realize, oh man.
Can you share an example of that?
Yeah, I could share probably lots of examples. It's pinning down even one of them. Going in and criticizing like a coach. They go to the whiteboard to give a talk. This is a pretty tactical, simple one. Going to whiteboard, and it's this is several years ago, but it is inept. And I'm watching this, and they're like giving this. I'm like, this is incoherent.
Meaning the coach is
coach is talking to the members, and I'm just sitting there as an athlete watching, and I'm like, and then I talk to the coach. I'm like, what the heck was that? Like, what are you doing? And what I saw was, hey, BJ, this is what I heard. This is what deliberately, because they were just looking at me with like doe eyes, like, oh no, the boss is mad at me and I don't even know why. That was my fault. Every word that they did not say was because of my lack of clarity of vision, lack of who we are, lack of our principles, lack of training. It was like of one finger I was pointing to that individual, all of them were pointing back to me, and I had to absorb that. But it wasn't just that one. That was a microcosm of everything I did not like about the Arsenal and Muncie CrossFit.
How did you give that coach the, what's the right word? The latitude or the space, whatever have you, where they understood that you were taking responsibility for their lack of an answer? Because what I see happen often, and what I've done in the past myself, is the coach doesn't have an answer. And I'm like, what do I need to say to this person? How many times do I need to tell them to be able to do this? There must have been a skill set that you deployed there that allowed that coach to say, oh, BJ's taking responsibility for the ineptitude that I just displayed. I'm safe here. I can come to him with problems.
Yes. I have another story that lines up to how I did that.
Okay.
Because I don't want to take credit for it. I have a client who will remain unnamed, CEO, very successful company. And he sent out a note to his whole team, middle of the year. It's a big construction company, and said, we're having a company meeting. And he sent out a note that says, hey, here's where we're going. Here's what we're going to do. And I want you all to understand that I am not the right CEO to lead us to that end. And just let that hang. And everyone's like, what's going on? And this is a hard charging, no nonsense. He said, but here's my plan to become that person over the next 5 years. And here's what I'm going to commit to you to become. And I looked at that and I'm like, that may be the single most impressive thing I've ever seen someone, especially wired like that, someone who is not wired to do or say those things.
Right.
That was like a 180. And I took that and I'm like, sounds like I have a couple conversations that I need to have. Like that was and then I had my own version of it just a few years ago where I was just like, hey, listen, I have two things to say. I have good news and bad news. Which ones do you want to hear first? And I gave my own version of the same thing. The good news was I do know where we're going to go and I know what it is. And I said, the bad news was why we are not already there is 100% my fault. And I literally, it wasn't just, hey, it's 100% my fault. Here's what you're going to, no, I went in and talked about how it's all my fault and how I exonerate all of you from all the things that most frustrate me about the things that you do here. And I take them back. And then we're going to work. It's not always going to be this way because we're going to distribute this. We're going to train. I committed to the path. So it wasn't just this, I wonder what he's going to do. No, I'm telling you what I'm going to do. And then I'm telling you because now I have given you leverage on me.
Does that make it difficult for you to pivot?
Pivot how?
let's say, for example, you're telling them, well, we're a gym that does this for these people in this way. And then you start working with a company like Active Life.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, we could do this for these people in this way. It might even be more fulfilling and more profitable.
No, I didn't have to. Why? Because that mea culpa aimed at the outcome level.
Okay.
And what Active Life brought in was a version of it. And I said, you want to get simple, and I have the strategic plan and I have all the different pieces that I work with my clients on for myself, for the company. I stuck to those and I said, hey, if you ever get lost and you don't remember all this stuff, just remember best. Our coaches on our staff deserve the best. What? Support, leadership, training, pay. Our members and our athletes, if that happens, will get best. What? Experience, vibe, connection, results, health, pain, all the things that they want. So whenever you're lost, just think, is it the best? And so when I got to Active Life, I told you Active Life was thrust upon me.
Which I loved.
Yeah, we could talk about that story if we want to. And I'm just like, all right. And then it wasn't BJ making the decision. It wasn't, I'm Captain BJ and I'm the cheese and you have to come to me and pitch me things. Mm-hmm. It was, I've already told you what makes decisions for this organization. And it's not McKay Gym. Mm-hmm. It is the Arsenal. And that is all of us, including our community members. That's what this place is. But I am responsible for standing behind who we say we are, like our vision and mission. This is where we're going. And the mechanisms to get there, I'm less concerned with.
Well, when you speak about everybody having that say, I would love for you to dial in on it a little bit more, because what I hear, old me, very young, very immature business owner me, hears you saying, we put out surveys, we ask people what they want, and then we just make sure that we have all of it. And I know that that's not what you're saying.
No, it's just, I think that going back to my story where I talked about myself being the problem. When we commit and you lay down crystal clear that vision and mission, not the tactics, we are a CrossFit gym and it will only be CrossFit. We are a cycling gym. And that's the only thing that I'd say that's a big mistake.
Right.
I think it's a big mistake because now you've left a lot of the creativity about how to, you're away from the result and now you're buried in a mechanism. I think that's probably not the way that you want to do it. And I think people that are too locked into those are like, man, you know what I wish? I wish I wouldn't have done that. But I want to commit to the big themes. And when I get the surveys, when I do them, and when we're talking to athletes in and out, and I'm talking to coaches, those members are now, we've trained them how to hold us accountable to the ends that we committed to. And whenever that's happening, then we can adjust. Hey, we're hearing this, we're hearing that. Well, they always complain. I'm like, but why are you mad about it? Mm-hmm. If they're so full of it and that's not true, why are you getting so emotional?
Well, so speaking of holding yourself accountable, there are two questions that I want to ask you in order here. The first one is, there was a period of time when your gym was a member of our program and we dropped the ball on the way that we serviced you.
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
What made you, first and for efficacy for everybody else, what it was we failed to provide the mentorship, the accountability, and the presence, if you will, that we promised you when you signed up. You didn't cancel your membership. You gave us another chance, and I didn't have to sell you on giving us another chance. It was your idea. Why?
Why I wanted to stick with Active Life?
Yeah, like what? I think that people have bad experiences and here's the thing. I'll get to the next question and then we'll come back to the first one.
Okay.
You said something profound to me
for
once.
Me,
yeah, where you said you can only sell your worst experience. If you sell people your best experience and they come and have anything less, it's a failure. Mm-hmm. If you sell your worst experience and somebody comes in and says, this is so much better than that, then that's to be expected every time. Now, you experienced what I would say would be us selling our worst experience, right? We have all this great information, but nobody was guiding you through it the way that we were supposed to. It fell through the cracks. Why not cancel your membership?
A couple things. One is gratitude, because prior to that, let's say what I was tuned up for is we got competent instruction. Mm-hmm. We were dealing with competent people. So like I saw the makings of a company that is moving and growing And maybe it's because I've seen so much working at Advisa for 13 years. I've seen companies at different stages where it's like, it's not this, even the biggest ones you can think of are not maybe the fine-tuned, polished machines that you might think they are.
Right.
So first of all, there was that piece where it's like, I saw value early, and that value purchased that gratitude where I'm like, well, they know what's going on. Let's have a conversation. That it merited that conversation. It could have gone, I didn't know. Like I had the conversation. You could have said, it could have went a variety of ways. That's one. Second of all, is I'm not that great. Who the hell am I to be coming back and like, you know what you should be doing? You should be doing like, you should, here's what, and yell at you and talk you down and do for what? For what? Because I'm so brilliant. Why am I not running Active Life? Why am I like, shut up, BJ. Because I think that there's people get tone deaf. They have one bad experience. That guy's just a jerk. Whoa. You're never a jerk. Really? I mean, let's straw back you. You never driven, you never cut somebody off. You never, yeah, like, come on. Well, that was one moment. Interesting. But for that person, that's just who they are. That's just what they do. They wake up and they just live the jerk life. Right. Like, I know I'm just being metaphorical, but I think that I saw that. I was grateful. And I'm always priming, and I'm trying to do a better job of this still. And I think I have a long way to go, which is, I think folks don't afford other people enough grace. Particularly when it's asked for, particularly like people quit you and get mad at you, and members or former business people, they go behind, they do this back channel stuff and everything else where it's like, just give somebody the opportunity. Well, they're wrong. Give them the opportunity to say that. Give them the opportunity to respond and see that they're a human being. They might say, oh my, I didn't understand. That was not my intention, which will happen like 98% of the time. I did not know you feel that way. I own all of that. Here's what I want to do differently. And I set a path. It's not to accept that they're going to keep doing something that's damaging to you, but give them a chance.
Well, I think what would be valuable here is if you could explain to anybody listening, because they work with technology companies for their software, right? They have coaches in their gym. They have members in their gym. How to bring to somebody who you're paying for a service or who you're expecting a service from or a relationship from who's not delivering on it the way that all the promises were made. You brought it to me in such a professional way that I was like, I would be a fool to do anything in regards to defending it. Right? I would be such a fool. BJ gave me such latitude to say, yeah, we fucked that up. And we're going to make it right for you. How does somebody bring a problem in a way that has other people wanting to do that?
Yeah, I'd say the first step is drain the emotion out of it. You can get mad. You can get all these. We're paying this amount. You can do, and I went through that. What the hell's going on? What's going on? Like, wait, what? Well, what's going on with Active Life? I don't know. And I'm like, okay. And then another week goes by. What's going on there? I got to go check. And I'm like, beep. So I'm like, that was it. And then I'm like, then I finally got to the point where I'm like, I got to reach out to somebody there and talk about what's going on. It usually leads when you are motivated to pick a different action. It's usually inspired by something emotional. So you can do it, right? And you can tell clients and people have heard these tactics, write the long Word document that's a quote unquote email that you're never going to send.
Right.
Find a way, work out, talk to somebody, yell at somebody that's so distant from the situation, it's never going to find the light. Do whatever you got to do to drain the emotion out. Then look at clearly, objectively, explicitly, what were the promises made for the dollars delivered? And then compare them. And then that's where the negotiation takes place. Where are the perceived, and I won't even go as far as saying, I know there's gaps. Where are my perceived gaps from what was promised, and how well do I understand this with what I expected or what was promised for the money given? And then that's where it starts when you reach out and send a note. Here's what I'm experiencing. Here's why I feel I'm experiencing it, and here's where I think the gap might be, and I have some ideas for what can remedy that. Are you open to talking about it? Clear, concise. I'm working off of the script you gave me, Dr. Sean, and I'm giving you my experience, which only I've had, whether it's right or wrong, like you shouldn't have felt that way, intention, et cetera, and then here's the dollars. And what I've given is stair steps for everybody involved to find a path to either, actually, you're wrong, BJ. You paid for this. And I'd be like, oh, I didn't realize that. I'm like, I'm not detail oriented. Could I have missed that? Sure. Or it's like, you actually weren't doing something, BJ, and your team failed. Okay. I'm willing to own. So it's knowing that at any one of the buckets, we may be the ones causing the problem that we're seeing across there. So coming in that way, and I know the coaches listening to this, if you've been screwed over by like a software company or a management company, or even a t-shirt provider, like you get to like, I'm going to go and I'm going to walk down there. I'm not telling you not to go to like execute justice. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is these kind of strategic pauses are so critical to getting a place where I just talked before about having some empathy and affording some grace while bringing clarity to a situation you will no longer tolerate and getting to a path that you agree upon, that we're getting on the bus together at the end. So when you do that, you'd find that I'll tell you what, I find clear paths, and sometimes some things cost me more money. Some things cost me less money, whatever, but I find a fair, reasonable path. And I have yet to come to a situation where both parties don't respect each other more. Right. At minimum, may not be may not be love. In some cases it does. You're like, wow, this is really cool. But at minimum, there's a dual lift, which is what you're aiming for.
I want to share another time in our company's history where something similar happened and it didn't end the same way. And I want to get your take as to how you would handle it in our situation. We had a client who their coaches, the way that it works, if you're listening to this and you're not familiar, the gym owner gets one set of mentorship. The coaches get another set of mentorship. Right. So you have your mentor who works with you, and then your system of information you're getting, the coaches have theirs and their mentors. Right. It's separate. This was about a year ago, maybe a year, almost 2 years ago. The gym owner wasn't really engaged. The coaches weren't really engaging. And the gym owner came to me and said, we're not getting any value. There's no information coming out. And I said, there is information coming out. Nobody is showing up for it. And we've emailed you and called you and asked you to show up, and nobody is showing up. And his response to me, and I thought it was justified, was you're blaming the member of the gym who didn't lose weight for not coming to the gym when you tell us, yes, that person has a responsibility. It's also your responsibility as a gym owner to go make sure that member understands the value of the gym or that you end their membership. Mm-hmm. And you didn't do that. I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. That's true. So what I did is I said, for the next 3 months, because there were 3 months in which your coaches were not engaging when they were getting information and they didn't use it, I'm going to give them the information for the next 3 months. And I'm going to follow up with you after every call that they're supposed to be on. And I'm going to make sure that you understand what they were supposed to be learning and make sure that you understand how to apply what they were supposed to be learning. Okay. After 7 weeks of the coaches not showing up with the awareness that they were supposed to be there, I said to him, I kind of feel like a broken record. And I'm reaching out to you on a regular basis saying, the coaches are supposed to be here. You're supposed to be here and you're still not doing it. You're not paying right now. I don't think it makes sense for us to continue to pretend that this is ever going to change. What could I have done better?
I don't know what happened with that, but it sounds fair. Everything that you brought up. And if there was something I'd add, you asked me, what could you have done better? I'm going to avoid the word better. Different. And I will use the word different. Thank you very much. And I think that what I do, and this is kind of putting on my advisor, my consulting hat, what I would go in and what aren't they connected with? Where is there a lack of clarity or motivation to produce the behavior on behalf of the gym? Are they in generally disorganized? When I go into disorganized, don't really know what they want, they might not even be good leaders. And like, they haven't had that story I told earlier. They haven't had that moment of awareness where like, whoa, this is my fault. People aren't showing up because I don't show up. People are always late because I'm late. And understanding that like whoever you're going to work with, at some point, Dr. Sean, I got to come to the meeting to get the information. And you tell me, hey, between now and next meeting, you need to do X, Y, and Z or you're not going to receive the value. And I failed to hold my team accountable in a reasonable format to doing it. You can talk to anybody you want to. You could bring in the best minds in the world and it's not going to happen. So I think what I end up doing, and this is the different version, is when I'm in a negotiation or I'm meeting with a new prospect for a project and I'm getting a sense of what's happened in the past and we're the new magic solution. Well, now that you're here, you're going to come in and you're going to save us and it's going to be great. And then it's easy in that moment to think like, yeah, you're right. They're terrible. The other companies you work with, they don't get it. And we're so awesome. Whoa. Sometimes I ask, hey, talk to me about previous processes you've rolled out before. And then I want to listen for coherent communication. Hey, when they've made mistakes, can you talk to me about how that that's worked out, because no one's perfect. I mean, even when we start, we'll probably slip up. We might miss an email that might be little. We hope it's little, but if it's big, how does that work? And I start to listen for how much accountability do they take? How many of me has been through here already? And then what patterns of behavior have they proven that they were willing to change? And I even try to I try to help them as much as I can. So well, nothing like this. Well, what else have you rolled out in the company that's stuck for a year? Let's say a year's it. What? Nothing. Wow. Dr. Shen, what do you make of that? So that would be, I wouldn't say better. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if it would have helped.
Well, what you're speaking to is something, what we ended up doing was evaluating, should we have signed this person up in the first place? And deciding no. And then looking at, okay, well, we never should have signed this person up. They were not a candidate. What are the reasons that we thought that they were? What are the reasons that they turned out not to be? How do we now make it so that part of our system is it's when somebody presents with these things, we don't take them as a client, even if they want to enroll. And that was really helpful. What you just described, though, is another layer that I think we can even add on the front end, where people are only going to tell you what they're conscious of, right?
Yes.
So if I say, do you follow through on the things that you're supposed to do? Yeah,
sure, I do. Of course,
right.
100%.
Is your team bought in? Yes. When you ask them, tell me about the last time that you rolled something out that stuck for a year, and they're like, oh, we haven't done that. Why not? Well, it never really works. It never really sticks. Was the team bought in before you did those things? Yeah. It now leads me to understand that they're perhaps lacking some awareness. So that's valuable.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I always like to start with the highest leader possible that I can get access to, usually because they're not operating on some sort of budget or other technical criterion. Their KPIs, or their key performance indicators, are outcomes. That's where I do, and likely you do, that your best work, where it's not like we're checking a box, we're doing this. And I like to figure out, what are you willing to suffer to turn pro?
Right.
Like I'm looking at this screen. We're here at Active Life. That's a real thing. And, there's this quirky t-shirt where, in our fitness community, there's all these t-shirts where it's everybody wants to be a beast.
Right.
Until you have to do what beasts do. And that's where there's a big old bold line where someone, and think, I'm going to be a beast, I'm going to hit this workout. And you get these alpha people, male and female, that what I'm about to ask you to do is actually the polar opposite of what you think it is.
Oh man, I have a story I can share with you. It's really brief. When I was working with Lindy Barber as a one-on-one client when she had knee pain, she was working out with Team Mayhem, Rich Froning and the best in the world. And there it's a very alpha environment. We're going. And she was like, I need to be tough. I need to be mentally tough. I need to just do this and be mentally tough. And I said, you know what? What I find is that the most mentally tough athletes are not the ones who can suffer through a workout. They're the ones who can make mentally difficult decisions that are emotionally conflicting, that they then need to stand behind. That's what mental toughness looks like for an athlete. So when they tell you we're doing 1,000 wall balls as a workout today as a team, and you say, I'm not in, that's what the tough athlete does. Another question for you back on what we were talking about before. In the role that you're in as a consultant, that we're in as a consultancy, for lack of a better way to describe it, I find myself sometimes in a position where I'm like, I'm not really sure if I should continue moving forward on this. And what I'm describing is when the client that you're working with is not the client they're not the person yet who they hired you to help them become.
Okay.
And there's this conflict of, do I want to keep working with this person if they're going to treat myself, our staff, in the way that they're treating us, when they hired us knowing that they don't know how to treat people? Do you follow me on
100%.
that? Where do you draw the line on that kind of stuff?
I go back. I know I'm going to hit similar drums.
It's okay.
Is first of all, there's a priority of care when you're a leader. If I'm Dr. Sean leading my company, and I don't lead advisors, a leadership 5 team, they do an amazing job. But if I'm having a project team, if you look out for and are clear with and understand the boundaries and scope of your team first, and you talk to them about those barriers, where's the field of play and what's out of bounds. It's creating clarity around what that is so I can see it coming. Hey, BJ, I experienced can I show you an email that I got? Hey, I experienced like this. So it's training journey. Like you have to train your team to communicate when something unfair is like that's not right is happening. Hey, this is not somebody that seems to want to work with us or push. The easy button on that is, hey, if you experience discomfort, send it to me. Like that's the easy near term. And then I could see it and I'm like, oh, actually, doctor, that was a fair question. Let me tell you why. And let's talk about how to handle it. Sometimes it's like, what the whole, okay, whoa. I got this. Cause I want to go in. I see like, this is a complete misalignment. This is out of hand. So it's clarity from the leadership level. And then it's looking at your team and how well have I defined what is the role of the customer, the client, the member, whatever it is. And have I clearly communicated that to them so that there's we pre-negotiated the friction. Right. When you bring the friction, we have words with it and we have commitments about how we're going to deal with it. And you're either following through with your end of the bargain or not. And same thing with us. It's a two-way street. We might have missed a note. We didn't communicate fairly. We were too terse trying to solve a problem, not because we were malicious. It was maybe because we're on our way to a flight. And I think the best thing to do is to get back. But it got received as you're not giving me time.
Right.
So I think it goes on both sides when you're already in. But when you're vetting, you can do the same thing in that process as long as you just don't see dollar signs in your eyes. Because I think when some people get it, if you're thinking about like, sales training influencing, when you think you're getting to the honeypot, it's so easy to just glom over that because it's superfluous details. Yep. We'll get to that later. I'm like, this big deal could end up costing you an awful lot of money, time, and extra meetings that you don't see right now because you're too near term.
And reputation.
Oh yeah.
Right. Because everybody talks. Well, the asshole to one person is the best friend to another. And then that's something that I think is a valuable thing to remember before you take a client on. Because, one of the things that I've always prided us on as a company is that we don't say yes to everybody who comes with a credit card. Right. The standard of getting in is not a heartbeat and a credit card.
Right.
It's interest in doing the kind of work that we ask people to do and willingness and wantingness to do the uncomfortable things necessary to actually execute, not just ideate. I mentioned earlier about you that you told me about selling your worst experience. What does that mean? And I'll give you some context. The worst experience is what I would describe that you went through with us for 2 months, where you weren't getting.
It wasn't that bad, everybody listening, by the way. It's not that big of a ball drop.
Look, what it was we weren't holding you accountable the way we promised to. You're still here. So it's not like it was this ball drop where like, oh my God, the whole company fell apart and BJ was right and we suck.
And I'm trashing you online.
Right. No, I asked you about it because I wanted to talk about it publicly. That's not the worst experience that we want to sell. That's not what you're describing. So what are you describing? What
I'm describing is there's a line of promise in your marketing and messaging and what you're selling people. And there's the line of the least, let's say competent, not intellectually or anything, but in terms of experience, training, et cetera, that's going to deliver said service. That is my company. It's not, I got this great coach, my head coach, Eric Van Mater. He's amazing. But that, like, you can't sell that. Because depending upon when a person walks in, that's not being honest. That's playing the Russian roulette wheel of honest.
Right.
If you come in and I just happen to walk in and Dr. Sean happens to be the therapist that's going to work. And that is you want to stay up at night? Keep doing that. Right. It's great all the time. This is going to always, and I'm like, always and never. You better really caveat that. There are a lot of asterisks next to that with a lot of small print. There should be. So I think that's where you look at your company and saying, who is in here? Is it because, and there's a lot of different things. And I can look at my gym and we have terrific coaches, but varied experiences levels, varied levels of experience with active life content, varied levels. And I have to pay attention to not only were you there consuming it, do you understand it? Step one. And then second, have I seen you practice it in reality? Have I seen the knowing doing gap show up? And now that's not me in this case. It's our head coach, Eric. How well are you truing up the gaps that we're seeing based upon the performance level? And they're different for everybody in different ways. So that's what I mean by selling your worst experience. It's not selling like, here's how we screw up. You want to still start?
Right.
It's more of whatever happens, you pay this money, you show up and do your part, this happens for you.
Right.
And And I'm going to sleep at night, and I'm not going to have to worry about that happening.
No matter what, this is our process. This is what you're going to go through. This is what we expect. This is why we do this. This is the purpose of this part, the process, and the payoff of this part. The level with which you're going to experience it is going to depend largely on you.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't eliminate if you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to do that. It's different members, and sometimes it's you, different people on your team are even going to go below that waterline. Mm-hmm. And that's where that's the hard part of being a leader. You got to be in it saying, yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm. We screwed up. And by the way, thank you for sharing thank you for giving us the opportunity, because this is a development opportunity.
100%.
And I think that's the thing you carry it. So, hey, I really hate to say this about Coach so-and-so, or I'd really hate to say this about your teammate at Advisa. I'd really hate to say this about no, like even if it's a feeling, it's a story you're telling. I want it early and often. Mm-hmm. So that we can address it, but the thing that I think stops folks is it's embarrassing. It could be humiliating when you've made those commitments. And I think that's where there's a line between leaders, gym owners of companies that cross that line. And like, this is not going to feel good. And it's not going to feel good. So I'm afraid of their feelings. It's not going to feel good because I'm about to get dressed down.
Have you ever discussed the difference between embarrassment and shame?
I have.
Okay.
In different ways. And I've heard you talk about it too.
Well, but the reason I bring it up is, to me, embarrassment is I'm embarrassed that happened. Mm-hmm. I'm embarrassed of that moment. I'm embarrassed of that action. Shame is I'm embarrassed that I feel ashamed that that's who I am. Does that make, do you follow 100%. Me? And what I think is so valuable about any kind of criticism that anybody can bring to any business is if the business owner or the leadership, the people who the problem is coming to, are able to detach their personal identity with the problem that happened, they can be embarrassed that this happened, and then allow that embarrassment to make that never happens again, mm-hmm. and improve the entire structure. And when you can do that, you can genuinely ask people to please tell me anytime you are getting less than you wanted, mm-hmm. Or less than you expected, or even exactly what you expected, right?
Right.
But when you feel shame, when it becomes a personal attachment, then you start hiding from it. And the difference is now it becomes, I'm not a good person. Mm-hmm. I must have done something wrong. And I've lived in both spaces, right? And I can tell you the much more productive one is, oh, I'm really good. That person pointed that out. We can mm-hmm. make it better. So,
and I'd caveat that with two other words that might come up, which is guilt and regret, also useful tools.
Okay.
Not shame. Guilt means I'm above that decision. Okay. I can make a better decision. You should feel guilty. And then regret is I'm culpable. It was a crime of commission. Mm-hmm. In a lot of cases, I made a decision. Well, I made the decision to not. I made the decision to do. You made a decision. We're talking about a decision. Mm-hmm. And that's information now. That's a data point mm-hmm. that you can do something with. But I think anybody listen, you shared about that. I've lived both. I have a tattoo on my right forearm that, like Ryan, I read all the ego books by Ryan Holiday. I got ego is the enemy tattooed on my right arm because I have a chip on my shoulder. Texas might be too small. Mm-hmm. That served me really well as I came up and I made myself feel small. I felt shame. I felt all these things. I got picked on. I got all that stuff and I built armor up. But then what it does is it starts to drown out opportunities to be called to a higher version. It does the opposite of what you built it for. Mm-hmm. It distances you from other people and distances you in your gym for feedback. For sure. There's probably people listening to this right now. There are members that have very useful, critical feedback to give you that they are not giving you. They're giving it to other members. And they're giving it to their family. They're giving it to the community because, well, they just got to come and talk to me. Yeah, that's why, And honestly, I and members of my team, we can be the same exact people at times when the way that we're communicating, the way that we carry ourselves, we are not clear receptors for many people who have very good feedback to give us. That is an art form that any given day, any leader listening to it, probably yourself, definitely me, we can be off. I could be not receptive to it. Or someone gives it to you and I make them pay for it. And then all of a sudden, why don't they come talk to me anymore?
Right.
It seems like they're good now. Are they?
Right.
Are they really though? Are they really happy now that you showed you're right, BJ?
Yeah. It's the adage of, when somebody makes a mistake and you punish them for it, they mm-hmm. don't learn how to solve their problems. They learn to hide their mistakes.
Right. Well, and I have something to add to that too. When it comes to your team, be it your team in Active Life, my team at the Arsenal, when you have an aligned group that understand where you're going, how we're doing it, et cetera, and like what their job is, what's their role in that happening, the mistakes in those moments, they're their own punishment.
Yeah.
It's easier to lead when you're really clear about what it is, but you're in the stew with them. Mm-hmm. You have a role, and here's where it starts, and here's where it stops, and here's what Dr. Sean does and doesn't do. You're on equal footing now to screw up and own it. So it takes away the burden of, I got to have this tough conversation with Steve. You know, like, because I got to tell him this. And then Steve's walking around like unconscious. Everything's going great. I love coaching here. Like, that's a leader. That's not Steve's fault. That's your fault, boss, because there was a lack of clarity as to what's going on. As long, but I think that sometimes can get missed.
Oh, it often gets missed. It's one of the things that I'm most grateful for is that we have a team of people at Active Life who bring problems to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about like, I'm struggling with how do I make this widget work? I'm talking about, we were in a meeting the other day with our whole team. And I said something fairly flippantly because I didn't think somebody was speaking seriously about what they were talking about. I thought they were joking. Mm. And they told me in front of everybody on the team, I was sharing something with you that was fairly vulnerable, and I don't like the way that you responded. It made me feel small, and I'd appreciate if you didn't do that again. And I was like, 100%.
Oof.
But it was great because it was somebody who is close to me, who I care very much about, who had the safety to do that in a meeting. And after the meeting was over, it's not like anybody on the team respected me less because I did something wrong. Right. I apologized for it and we moved forward. Mm-hmm. That's something I'm grateful for because I got challenged yesterday by Ken, who you know as well.
Yeah.
I was talking to him and another member of our team, Matt, and Matt challenged me to take 2 weeks off from work. And I was like, I can take 2 weeks off. We have a phenomenal team. I'm not afraid of taking 2 weeks off. And then Ken said, no. 4 weeks. Yeah. And I was sitting with my wife and I said,
thanks,
okay.
Ken.
I said, it's okay. I'll do it. And then she looks at me and she's like, really? You're going to do it? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. Not because I want to test how things will go, because I'm confident that things will be better when I get back. And that only happens when the team is willing and wanting to stand up and tell you what's wrong.
Right. Well, in my experience with you thus far, you are, and I can share some of this. You walk a tightrope, and you're walking this tightrope that's very, very taut because you're a dangerous person. You're not unkind. Mm-hmm. You're dangerous. Why are you dangerous? You know where you're going, and you're convicted to an outcome, and you have competent answers, and you just like how you wake up in the morning this is my perception, by the way. You mm-hmm. correct me if I'm wrong. Like that is incredibly intimidating to other people. And it's incredibly, and you're laying down a gauntlet. It's usually unconscious because I do the same thing. And I'll say we for a second, if you allow. Yeah. That is, we become dangerous characters unintentionally, because sometimes the battlefield of ideas, mm-hmm. It's just a battlefield of ideas. It's even. No, it's not.
Right.
There is an alpha and I'm it.
Yeah.
And it's like, there is a leverage here that I'm not, I know it's there, but I'm not paying attention to it. And I assume, yeah, bring me anything. Yeah, bring it. And then oftentimes I'm disappointed mm-hmm. that I'm not getting any feedback, thinking what's wrong with everyone else? Hey, BJ, you control the battlefield and all the weapons. And you're asking them, which one do you want me to fire at you? Which one do you, and I think that's, obviously it's a strong analogy, but I think it's something that folks wired like you and wired like me. It's one that we should hold on to and keep like visually in front of us at different times and address with people. And even coaches listening, if you think like, man, that's just like me. How are you regularly having dropperfuls of that to talk to people, even on one-to-one basis? Hey, I know I can be like, and I've sat with you for a while here and I can see it in you, but I know I can be like this. And like, how often are you sending a text? Hey, just wanted to catch up and say this. How have I been doing? I try to plant people to say, hey, dude, you're doing it again. Mm-hmm. Or even in the meeting, hey, can I do this? I'm going to turn my phone on in this meeting and just, hey, if I start, can you just do the old virtual kick me under the table if I start getting hot about this, because I know I'm going to get frustrated and I don't want it to come across that way because I want this person to talk. Those are my best moments. Oftentimes it's after the fact. Hey, do you want to know why, BJ, no one talks to you? And then they don't even have to say anything else. I've just owned back to the guilt and the regret. Yeah, what's up? And it's like, I already know where we're going to end up, but like, go ahead. Who do I have to say I'm sorry to? How many hours of meetings is it going to take me to make up for the fact? And this is not anyone's fault. It is my fault. Yeah. I have made that happen.
Well, that's one of the things that Ken has been most helpful for me with. I laughed when you said intimidating because I'm 5'10", 160 pounds. I'm not physically imposing, right? No one's like, oh, that's a world champion Muay Thai fighter. He's scary coming down the hallway. And I don't have a short fuse with our staff. So whenever people have told me like you have an intimidating presence, it makes me laugh because I'm like, if enough people are saying it, it must be true. And I can't fathom how it's true. But when I talked to Ken about it, one of the things he taught me was there are two things that you need to be thinking about. When you are in an office building and everyone has their own offices,
all right,
and yours is at the end of the hallway, you create an environment where when you open the door and walk down the hallway, if you're not careful of what your last 50 conversations with people were like, they're closing their door and hoping that you don't come knocking on their office because you're coming in to drop a bomb on something. And even if when you come in, it's to ask somebody something. When you're the leader, this is the second thing, when you're the leader, requests, favors, these little things that you don't think are a big deal. Hey, would you mind? Those are not perceived as requests. Those are perceived as demands. And people will say yes, and they will do them despite their better judgment that they shouldn't. And then you leave the opportunity for resentment that you asked them to do this.
Right.
And even though you didn't think you did. So what you're saying is resonant.
Yeah. And I think that tactically, if you're listening to this and what Dr. Sean just said resonates with you, how I call it my 4-to-1, my rule of 5, which is, and I use this with all my teams the best I can. And by the way, if anyone's listening to this, I know I screwed this up a lot. It's just different times, different seasons. But of the last 5 times I've reached out, how am I reaching out? To be grateful, to thank people, to ask them to take something off their plate, or how they're doing in general. Like how often have I done that to my requests? How often have I done that? Which is like, well, I'm busy. I got all this stuff going on. Everyone knows I have stuff going on. I'm like, no one's unaware. But that makes all those 4 touch points all the more powerful when you pause at a time you don't need something, where yes, you are busy, to say, hey, a lot's going on for me. I can only imagine how much is going on for you at someone down chain or over here or newer at the company or whatever. Like that resonates. Now when they see, and I in my training, I bring up cell phones and I'm like, you want an engagement tool? Let me give you an engagement tool. Hey, if did you ever anybody that rings on your phone, or it comes a special ring, or there's their face that comes up, that you just start smiling when you see it? It like changes your state. No matter where you're at, you're like, oh, something good's about to happen. Oh yeah, hold on one second. Hey, Sean, do you mind if I? And you get it. Like, yeah. Think about that relationship. I want you to write something. We do this in our trainings. Let's write some stuff. Write down what it brings up. Why, and talk about it, etc. Then we come back. You have another person that when they call, it's almost like the Darth Vader's theme song. It's like, check hi. And you don't even have to pick it up. Your energy level and confidence just took a hit. Nothing happened. It's what you talked about walking down the hall. It just took a hit. And it's like, you're thinking about how can I not answer this and then have a good reason for it later, because it's already done its damage. And sure enough, you go, hey, how's it go? And then sure enough, what happens?
Right.
Here it is. Someone's, and I call it inflicting themselves upon you. And like, yeah, talk about those relationships. I'm like, great. So who do people hear when you call them? Go ahead. Oh, no, it's your turn to write down now. Go ahead, write your T-chart.
That's uncomfortable.
And it's like you go in, and after a while, if you're honest with yourself, you're like, oh man, this right side's a little too, oh boy. Great. So in terms of growing as a leader, I think we have our next meetings. What do I need to do? What do I need to meet with so-and-so about? I think you need to meet to apologize to all of those people. Well, then what? I think just that at first, and then stop. Don't do anything else to them anymore. Just get them, because just even having that meeting with you one-to-one's probably going to decrease their confidence level. And all we can do is hope that it brings it back to baseline when they walk out, because now they don't trust you yet either. Now I'm going to observe that rule of like 5 I just talked. What's going to happen with my next 3 interactions? And leaders are thinking like, oh, this is not going to be that hard. Really? Really?
No,
You hired?
I think people in charge are thinking this is not going to be that hard. I think leaders are spending all of the time knowing how hard it's going to be so that it can be easier for the other person.
And this is hard. This is hard for me. I mean, I'm out here selling this, consulting on this, talking to people about this, like working with the team and doing it. I probably spend a lot more of my mental and emotional energy on self-management still. Well, you're a consultant. You must run the best gym in the world. Yeah, I'm so awesome at running a gym. I call Active Life, hey, help, I'm screwing. This could be so much better. It's like, you're such a genius. It's like, I don't feel like one. I feel like I'm tripping, around, and I'm successful in certain cases, honestly, in spite of myself, rather than because of anything that I'm doing. And I think that could bring you shame. See, I'm just a screw up.
Yeah.
I made a big mistake. Back to our early part of today's conversation. I distributed my focus too much. My goals have to come back, all this terrible stuff. Or own it, learn, and then seek out competence. So if you're listening to this, many of the people listening to this are active life. They're active lifers. Congratulations. There you go. You've done the step to say, hey, I need to talk to somebody to ask me very hard questions.
Right.
That are aimed at my outcomes. And that's what you do.
Well, I think, to your credit, it's you came looking for help to make your gym better. And that's credit in itself. And your experience as a consultant means that you knew what kind of help might be out there. And then you went and you got it. And you've allowed your staff to do a job such that the gym has improved, measurably improved month to month. Yes. I get DMs from coaches on your staff telling me how much better the gym is, how much they're improving it. Yeah. So I think that it's easy for people who are listening to this who feel like they're in the leader position to feel like I'm not allowed to ask for help. And I'm not even talking about calling us as a client, right? Like I'm not talking, this is not a sales pitch. In the business, asking coaches, asking the front desk person, I need your help with this. I don't know how to do it. I think that you being the person who they know that you are, reaching out and getting help allows them to know I'm also allowed to ask for help. Right. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to pretend to know everything because BJ's not even pretending to know everything. And I thought he did.
But I think and thank you for some of those words, but I think that's the hardest part of this whole thing is it's attractive to be bigger. It's attractive to live in a persona that's above other people. That's your ego wants nothing more. Than that. So you seek it. And by the way, if you're listening and you're seeking that, hey, welcome to the game.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the battle. But I think I don't want to lose my train of thought, but as you're thinking about that situation, why wouldn't you do it? You don't want to come across like you're not competent. So that it's like, well, I got to be there for I have to be so polished. But I think that there's a practical balance. And I talk about this when we're bringing in new coaches and I talk to them often is where is your confidence level and where's your competence level? And I think that sometimes I find that people are more than competent enough. And their confidence level's at a 50% watermark to that standard. And it's like, it's literally, as a leader, you're shining a light to be like, listen, here is evidence that you've proven you can do these things. And then they hold the same light to me where it's like, how do you learn really fast? You want to learn faster? Yeah. Pump your confidence level up above your competence level and then go out into the world and take shots. And you're like, whoa. I
was going to say, I thought you were going to say the opposite because that's how I live. My confidence is above my competence.
Fastest way to learn. You're past the 4% challenge zone where you learn and you're into like the 100% challenge zone where it's like, I'm swimming in a sea of my ignorance, trying to find these outcomes for people where no one's helping me because no one's been here. And I have a piece here and a piece there. And I feel like I'm swimming. We talked about falling. I talked about falling in love before. Falling. Imagine your hands. If you're just listening to this, you're just grabbing. Welcome to entrepreneurship. Welcome to leadership. What should you do today? What's the right thing to do today? And I'm like, and BJ, what's the right thing to do today? And I'm like, hey, you're in the seat.
Yep.
You can't call a consultant or can't call Active Life to be like, what do I need to do? They can give you some questions to ask, but it's a disruptive place to be. And it's where, and you've talked about this on your podcast, It's imposter syndrome. They're going to see like I'm a charlatan. They're going to know I'm speaking out my rear end. I'm like, hey, that's part of it. You have to set a standard. Like, are you that thing? And then go to be like, let's find out. You can still be honest. Yeah. I believe I can get this outcome. Have you got it before? No, but. You can still be very honest and go out and just know that there might be a humbling moment rolling toward you. Hey, I promised you I thought I could get this done. And I committed to it and I was convicted and I believed I could. Here's how far I got this, Dr. Sean.
Yeah.
And then it's like, guess what? Mercy of the court. That's part of the game.
I think if there's one thing people can take away from this episode, and there are many things, I want them to take away the two-sided T-chart. When you call people, are they excited and lightened, or are they dreading and heavy? That I've been thinking about that since you said it, and it's been distracting me. But
it distracts me when I say it too.
We're about to hop on a call with a bunch of gym owners within the ProPath group. Is there anything that you would like to leave the audience listening to this with?
Yes, I think a couple of things. One, that from a tactical standpoint, that T-chart idea is one that's a healthy one to do not just once, to do it on the regular. I think the second thing I would share is the 4 weeks that you were challenged to take off. And it might not be 4 weeks for anybody listening. It might be 5 minutes where you allow yourself the chance to be human. I mean, you might cry. You might like just breathe and do nothing. It might be in your car when you're driving up to maybe another job because you're trying to make all this stuff come together and admit to the fact that like give yourself some compassion because a lot of the alphas don't do it. I don't fear anything. I don't burn out. Burnout's for people that don't have the drive, everything else. Yeah, like stick around long enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? Make your goals big enough. It will strip you. So if you're listening to this and you come to Active Life and you're a pro-lifer because you were stripped down before this, you are beat up, you want this outcome and you've sacrificed a lot. And you might look back at some of the things that you're hearing and think like, I screwed that up. You are still in the game. You are still in the game. And that is a version of winning. That is a version of winning, and it is noble. It is noble to screw up as much as you, screw up as much as BJ, screw up as much as Dr. Sean, but you still in the game if you're listening to this, period. So I think that's a huge piece. But when you're there, just value the fact that when you're in that awareness moment, when it feels the worst and it feels the darkest, and you feel like, man, I don't even know how I'm going to get out of this. You are an amazing leader in that moment. That is the birth of a new version of you that's coming. All right. And if you've been birthed, I'm about to have my 6th child. It is a violent and scary process to be a part of. That's what it's like to be born as a leader. These moments that you're like, how am I going to survive this are the same ones you're going to be bragging about in a few months. Just remember that. So that's probably what I'd leave.
I appreciate it. BJ, is there anywhere people can find you if they want to learn more from you?
Yeah, there's a few places. If you go to advisausa.com, that's visa, like the credit card.com, advisausa.com/leadership talks. Leadership talks. That's where I put out content, my podcast, like they're free sessions that I put out that touch on many of the themes that we talked about today. And at BJ McKay 21 on the Insta, at BJ McKay on Twitter. Don't know how I got the handle. I never use Twitter. Not much of a social media guy. And then you can seek me out on LinkedIn, Brian BJ McKay. Brian BJ McKay, I'm on there. And if you reach out and have a question, if you're fellow ProPathers, I'd love to just lock arms with you and share my story to the degree to be useful. And I'm honored to be part of the community.
Very cool. Thank you, BJ.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life Podcast. Remember, if you feel inspired by our vision to humanize the healthcare industry, professionalize the fitness industry, and empower individuals to live their lives, to reclaim their physical freedom, to develop careers, helping people reclaim their physical freedom. All you need to do is head to activelifeprofessional.com, find the appropriate link that represents you, and get in contact. We'll see you there.